Hello, readers. Welcome back to Read with and B. We are continuing with our read Peter Pan. As always, any monies that are made from the readings of these chapters will go straight to Greater Ormond Street. As of yet, there have been none, but we have had money raised through our link to their donations page. And so, we are very grateful. Thank you very much. Let's get to it. Chapter 15. Hook or me this time. Odd things happen to all of us on our way through life without our noticing for a time that they have happened. Thus, to take an instance, we suddenly discover that we have been deaf in one ear and we don't know how long, but say half an hour. Now such an experience had come that night to Peter, and when we last saw him, he was stealing across the island with one finger to his lips and his dagger at the ready. He had seen the crocodile pass by without noticing anything peculiar about it, but by and by he remembered that it had not been ticking. At first he thought this eerie, but he soon concluded rightly that the clock had run down. Without giving it a second thought as to what might be the feelings of a fellow creature thus abruptly deprived of its closest companion, Peter began to consider how he could turn the catastrophe to his own use, and he decided to tick, so that wild beasts should believe he was the crocodile and let him pass unmolested. He ticked superbly, but with one unforeseen result. The crocodile was among those who heard the sound, and it followed him, though whether the purpose of regaining what it had lost, or merely as a friend, under the belief that it was again ticking itself, will never be known for certain. For like slaves to a fixed idea, it was a stupid beast. Peter reached the shore without mishap, and went straight on, his legs encountering the water, as if quite unaware that they had entered a new element. Thus many animals passed from land to water, but no other human of whom I know. As he swam, he had but one thought: hook or me this time. He ticked so long that now he went on ticking without knowing that he was doing it. Had he known, he would have stopped, for to board the brig by help of the tick, though an ingenious idea, had not occurred to him. On the contrary, he thought he had scaled her side as noiselessly as a mouse, and he was amazed to see the pirates cowering from him, with hook in their midst, as abject as if he had heard the crocodile. The crocodile! No sooner did Peter remember it than he heard the ticking. At first he thought the sound did come from the crocodile, and he looked behind him swiftly, and then he realized he was doing it himself, and then in a flash he understood the situation. How clever of me, he thought at once, and signed to the boys not to burst into applause. It was at this moment Ed Tynant, the quartermaster, emerged from the forecastle and came along the deck. Now, reader, what happened by your watch? Peter struck true and deep. John clasped his hands on the ill-fated pirate's mouth to still the drawing groan. He fell forward. 4 boys caught him to prevent the thud. Peter gave the signal. The carrion was cast overboard. There was a splash, and then silence. How long had it taken? 1. Slightly had begun to count. None too soon. Peter, with every inch of him on tiptoe, vanished into the cabin, for more than one pirate was screwing up his courage to look around. They could hear each other's distressing breathing now, which showed them that the most terrible sound had passed. It's gone, Captain, Smee said, wiping off his spectacles. It's all gone still again. Slowly, Hook let his head emerge from his ruff, and listened so intently that he could have caught the echo of the tick. There was not a sound, and he drew himself up firmly to his full height. Then here's to the Johnny Plank, he cried brazenly, halting. He cried brazenly, hating the boys more than ever because they had seen him unbend. He broke into a villainous ditty. Yo-ho, the frisky plank, you walks along it so, till it goes down and you go down, down to Davy Jones' Bloom. To terrorize the prisoners more, though with a certain loss of dignity, he danced along an imaginary plank, grimacing at them as he sang. And when he finished, he cried, "Do you want a touch of the cat before you walk the plank?" As they fell on their knees. "No, no," they cried, so piteously that every pirate smiled. "Fetch the cat, Jukes," said Hook. "It's in the cabin." The cabin! Peter was in the cabin. The children gazed at each other. "Aye, aye," said Jukes pithily, and he strode towards the cabin. They followed him with their eyes. They scarce knew that Hook had resumed his song, his dogs joining with him. Yo-ho, yo-ho, scratching cat, its tails are 9, you know, and when they're writ upon your back. What the last line was will never be known, for of a sudden song was stayed by a dreadful screech from a cabin. It wailed through the ship and died away, and then was heard a sudden crowing sound, which was well understood by the boys, but to the pirates it was almost more eerie than a screech. "What was that?" cried Hook. "Two," said slightly solemnly. The Italian Ciso hesitated for a moment, and then he swung into the cabin. He tottered out, haggard. "What's the matter with Bill Jukes, you dog?" hissed Hook, towering over him. "Matter with him? He's dead! Stabbed!" replied Ciso in a hollow voice. "Bill Jukes is dead!" cried the pirates. "The cabin's as black as a pit," Ciso said, almost gibbering, "but there's something terrible in there. The thing you heard crowing." The exultation of the boys, the lowering of looks of the pirates, both were seen by Hook. "Ciso," he said in his most steely voice, "go back and fetch me out that doodle-doo." Ciso, bravest of the brave, cowered before his captain, crying, "No, no!" But Hook was purring to his claw. "Did you say you would go, Ciso?" he said musingly. Ciso went, first flinging his arms in despair. There was no more singing. All listened now, and again came a death screech and again a crow. No one spoke except slightly. "3," he said. Hook rallied his dogs with a gesture. "Says death and odds and fish," he thundered. Who is to bring me that doodle-doo?" "Wait till Ciso comes out," growled Starkey, and the others took up the cry. I think I heard you volunteer," said Hook, purring again. "No, by thunder!" cried Starkey. "My Hook thinks you did," said Hook, crossing to him. "I wonder if it would not be advisable, Starkey, to humour the Hook." "I'll swing before I go in there," replied Starkey doggedly, and he had the support of the crew. "Is this mutiny?" said Hook, more pleasantly than ever. "Starkey's the ringleader." "Captain Mercy!" Starkey whimpered, all of a tremble now. "Shake hands, Starkey," said Hook, proffering his claw. Starkey looked around for help, but all had deserted him. As he backed up, Hook advanced, and now there was a red spark in his eye. With a despairing scream, the pirate leapt upon Long Tom and precipitated himself into the sea. "4," said Slightly. "And now," Hook said courteously, "did any of the other gentlemen say mutiny?" Seizing a lantern and raising his claw with a menacing gesture, "I'll bring that doodle-doo out myself." And with that he sped into the cabin. 5. Hal Slightly longed to say it. He wetted his lips to be ready. Hook came staggering out with his lantern. "Something blew out the light," he said, a little unsteadily. "Something!" echoed Mullins. "What if Ciso?" demanded the noodler. "He's as dead as Jukes," said Hook shortly. His reluctance to return to the cabin impressed them all unfavorably. The mutinous sounds again broke forth. All pirates are superstitious. And Cookson cried, "They do say the surest sign of a ship's accursed is when one of the men aboard can be, as when there's one on board thinking." Cookson cried, "They do say the surest sign of a ship's accursed is when there's one on board more than can be accounted for." "I've heard," muttered Mullins. "He always boards the pirate craft last. He had the tail, Captain." "They say," said another, looking viciously at Hook, "that when he comes it's in the likeness of the most wickedest man aboard." "Had he a hook, Captain?" asked Cookson insolently. And one after another they took up the cry, "The ship's doomed!" And at this the children could not resist but raising a cheer. Hook had well nigh forgotten his prisoners, but as he swung round to face them again, his face lit up. "Lads," he cried to his crew, "now here's the notion. Open up the cabin door and drive them in. Let them fight the doodle-doo for their lives. If he kills them, we're so much better. If they kill him, we're so much better. If he kills them, we're none the worse." And for the last time his dogs admired Hook, and devotedly they did his bidding, the boys pretending to struggle. They were pushed into the cabin, and the door was closed on them. "Now listen," cried Hook, and they all listened, but not one dared to face the door. Yes, one, Wendy, who all this time had been bound to the mast, for it was neither a scream nor a crow that she was watching. It was for the reappearance of Peter. She had not long to wait. In the cabin he had found the thing which he had gone in search of, the key that would free the children of their manacles, and now they all stole forth, armed with such weapons as they could find, first singing to hide them. Peter cut Wendy's bonds, and then nothing could have been easier but for them to all fly off together. But one thing barred the way, an oath. "Hook or me this time." And when he had freed Wendy, he whispered to her to conceal herself with the others, and himself took her place by the mast, her cloak around him, so that he should pass for her. Then he took a great breath and crowed. And to the pirates, it was a voice crying that all the boys lay slain in the cabin, and they were panic-stricken. Hook tried to hearten them, but like the dogs he had made them, they showed him their fangs, and he knew that if he took his eyes off them now, they would leap at him. "Lads," he said, ready to cajole or strike as needs be, but never quailing for an instant, "I've thought it out. There's a Jonah aboard." "Aye," they snarled, "a man with a hook." "No, lads, no, it's the girl. Never was luck on a pirate with a woman on board ship. We'll right the ship when she is gone." Some of them remembered this had been a saying of Flint's. "It's worth a try," they said doubtfully. "Fling the girl overboard," cried Hook, and they made a rush at the figure in the cloak. "There's none can save you now, missy," Mullins hissed cheeringly. "There's one," replied the figure. "Who's that?" "Peter Pan, the Avenger," came the terrible answer. And as he spoke, Peter flung off his cloak, and they all knew who it was that had been undoing them in the cabin. Twice Hook essayed to speak, and twice he failed. In that frightful moment, I think his fierce heart broke. At last he cried, "Cleave him to brisket," but without any conviction. "Down, boys, and at 'em!" Peter's voice rang out, and in another moment a clash of arms was resounding through the ship. The pirates had kept it together. Had the pirates kept it together, it was certain they would have won. But the onset came when they were still unstrung, and they ran hither and thither, striking wildly, each thinking himself the last survivor of the crew. Man to man they were stronger, but they fought on defensive only, which enabled the boys to hunt in pairs and choose their quarry. Some of the miscreants leapt into the sea, others hid in dark recesses, where they were found by Slightly, who did not fight, but ran about with a lantern, which he flashed in their faces, so that they were left half blinded and fell as easy prey to the reeking swords of other boys. There was little sound to be heard but the clang of weapons and the occasional screech or splash, Slightly, monotonously counting 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I think all were gone when a group of savage boys surrounded Hook, who seemed to have a charmed life, as he kept them at bay in a circle of fire. They had done for his dogs, but this man alone seemed to be a match for them all. Again and again they closed upon him, and again he hewed a clear space. He had lifted up one boy with his hook, and using him as a buckler, when another, who had just passed his sword through Mullins, sprang into the fray. "Put up your swords, boys," cried the newcomer. "This man is mine." Thus Hook found himself face to face with Peter. The others drew back and formed a ring around them. For long the two enemies looked at one another, Hook shuddering slightly, and Peter with a strange smile upon his face. "So, Pan," said Hook at last, "this is your doing." "Aye, James Hook," came the stern answer. "It is all my doing." "Proud and insolent youth," said Hook, "prepare to meet thy doom." "Dark and sinister man," Peter answered, "have at thee." Without more words, they fell to, and for a space there was no advantage to either blade. Peter was a superb swordsman, and parried with dazzling rapidity. Ever and anon he followed up a feint with a lunge that got past his foe's defence, but his shorter reach stood him in ill stead, and he could not drive his steel home. Hook, scarcely his inferior in brilliancy, but not quite so nimble in wrist play, forced him back by the weight of his onset. Hoping suddenly to end all with a favourite thrust, taught to him long ago by Barbecue at Rio. But to his astonishment, he found that this thrust turned aside again and again, and then he sought to close and give the quietus with his iron hook, which all the time had been pawing at the air. But Peter doubled under it and lunged fiercely, piercing him in the ribs. At the sight of his own blood, whose peculiar colour, you remember, was offensive to him, the sword fell from Hook's hand, and he was at Peter's mercy. "Now!" cried all the boys, but with a magnificent gesture, Peter invited his opponent to pick up his sword. Hook did so instantly, but with a tragic feeling that Peter was showing good form. Hitherto he had thought it was some fiend fighting him, but darker suspicions assailed him now. "Pan, who and what thou art!" he cried huskily. "I am youth, I am joy," Peter answered at a venture. "I am a little bird that has broken out of an egg." This, of course, was nonsense, but it was proof to the unhappy Hook that Peter did not know in the least who or what he was, which is the very pinnacle of good form. "Taught again!" he cried despairingly. He fought now like a human flail. Every sweep of the terrible sword would have severed in twain any man or boy who obstructed it. But Peter fluttered around him as if the very wind it made blew him out of the danger zone. Again and again he darted in and pricked. Hook was fighting with no hope now. The passionate breast no longer asked for life, but for a boon it craved, to show Peter to see Peter show bad form before it was cold forever. Abandoning the fight, he rushed into the power magazine and fired it. In 2 minutes, he cried, the ship will be blown to pieces. Now, he thought, true form will show. But Peter issued from the powder magazine with a shell in his hands and calmly flung it overboard. What sort of form was Hook himself showing? Misguided man though he was, we may be glad, without sympathizing with him, that in the end he was true to the traditions of his race. The other boys were flying around him now, flouting and scornful, and he staggered about the deck, striking up at them impotently, his mind no longer with them. It was slouching in the playing fields of long ago, or of being sent up for good, or of watching the ball game from a famous wall, and his shoes were right, and his waistcoat was right, and his tie was right, and his socks were right. James Hook, though not a wholly unheroic figure, farewell, for we have come to his last moment. Seeing Peter slowly advance upon him through the air, with dagger poised, he sprang upon the bulwark and cast himself into the sea. He did not know that the crocodile was waiting for him, for we purposely stopped the clock, that this knowledge may be spared to him. A little mark of respect from us at the end. He had one last triumph, which I think we need not grudge him, as he stood on the bulwark overlooking his shoulder at Peter gliding through the air. He invited him with a gesture to use his foot. It made Peter kick instead of stab. At last Hook had got the boon in which he cried. Bad form, he cried jeeringly, and went contented into the crocodile. And thus James Hook, Captain Hook, perished. 17 slightly sang out, but he was not quite correct in his figures. 15 paid penalty for their crimes that night, but 2 reached the store. Starkey to be captured by redskins, who made him a nurse for all their papooses, and a melancholy come down for a pirate, and Smee, who henceforth wandered about in the world in his spectacles, making a precarious living by saying he was the only man that Jas Hook ever feared. Wendy, of course, had stood by, taking no part in the fighting, though watching Peter with glistening eyes. But now all that was over, she became prominent again. She praised them equally, and shuddered delightfully when Michael showed her the place where he had killed one, and then she took them into Hook's cabin and pointed to his watch, which was hanging on a nail. It's 1:30. The lateness of the hour was almost the biggest thing of all. She had got them into bed. She got them all to bed in the pirates' bunk beds pretty quickly, you may be sure, all but Peter, who started up and down on the deck until at last he fell asleep by the side of Long Tom. He had one of his dreams that night, and cried in his sleep for a long time, and Wendy held him tightly. And that is the end of chapter 15 for Peter Pan. Thank you, readers, for joining me. Like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Stay safe, be awesome, and keep reading. Bye for now.